don't always just think of the end goal. Many times I hear students say, I am going to start this company and I've already got my business cards and I've got my website, but they've done none of the infrastructure work. They haven't really done a business plan. And that's really what it boils down to. And what you really need to identify is, can it be a business? How many people does it solve a problem for?
Welcome everyone to the TechGuide podcast, where we give actionable advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. We have Joe Fiore on the podcast today to talk about entrepreneurship, sales, and career pivots. I am so excited for this conversation as someone that loves entrepreneurship, and we've got a man that can talk in depth about it. So Joe, thank you so much for being here today. So happy to have you on.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Before we dive into entrepreneurship and advice you'd give to people that are maybe like a senior in college, recent graduates, all that type of stuff, let's lay the groundwork for who Joe Fiore is. Can you give a background of like what you doing, your background, and what you're doing specifically with the Zucker Institute for Innovation?
I would be more than happy to do so. I do have quite a unique background, and it's led me to a pretty unique place in life. I am a first or second generation American, depending on which side of the family you're talking to. And I come from a family of workers. And when I say that is I'm the first one to go forward with an advanced education. And that's out of close to 70 family members. And so who I am is a worker. And that's by default. It's kind of wired into me. My family came over from Italy specifically and started to run businesses. They primarily focused in the real estate and real estate development world. Throughout my career, though, I've had many pivots. Almost all of them had some origination in real estate. And as I grew and finally did go away to school and came back to family businesses, I was able to run and successfully exit from 5 startups. Some of them tied to my family business, others not. Where that led me to was a very unique place in life where I was fortunate enough to be sitting in a position to decide, where do I want to be? I decided in the nonprofit world was a place where I could really thrive and give back. And one of the stops along the way, actually, surprisingly, was with my fraternity. My fraternity's global headquarters was in Chicago, where I'm originally from, now living in Charleston, South Carolina. And I was helping to run the real estate arm of the fraternity. And as crazy as that sounds, it was no small feat. There are museums, grave sites, and very unique things, including the houses themselves, that totaled a substantial amount of money and needed property management, self-insured. So we were a self-insured agency. So very unique. Another pivot that ended up happening and where I sit today is serving as vice president of operations and business development at the Zucker Institute. The full name is the Zucker Institute for Innovation, Commercialization. It's quite a mouthful. And so you'll hear me commonly refer to it as ZI. And what ZI is, and we are located at the Medical University of South Carolina, we are the intellectual property manager for the institution. And much more than that, what we actually are is a commercialization office. And so in short, what we do is analyze and receive all of the new ideas that our incredible researchers and inventors are coming up with. We triage those ideas, wrap a patent around them, and then try and get them set for either a license out or build a startup. I concurrently now serve as director of Blue Sky Labs, which is the in-house arm or accelerator for some of those companies. And then additionally, I'm also a professor at the College of Charleston in the entrepreneurship department, teaching artificial intelligence commercialization.
Wow.
So I've just unloaded a lot on you. I'm happy to dive into any of those topics. Or answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I want to hit the entrepreneurship part, especially that you're doing, Professor. Obviously, you interact with a lot of college students. You've exited 5 companies. Like, you know the strengths and weaknesses of a college student probably pretty well, and you know what it takes to build an actual company. The question that I want to ask is, when you think about startups and building a company in college, obviously that's a huge feat to do. It's very hard, but there's maybe some better business opportunities you can do when you're actually in college. Can you speak to those that you think someone sophomore, junior, even a freshman, senior should consider starting a company in college?
Absolutely. The way that I'm currently guiding my students who are of that demographic is to look organically. And when I say that, you can't force a square peg in a round hole. So if you really want to teach surfing, but you live in the North, it's not going to happen. And so I tell my students constantly, what are you going through on a daily basis where you hit a pain point, or your friends are hitting a pain point, or your professors are hitting a pain point? You're constantly hearing it. Like, I can't get this thing done. Those are your doors of opportunity. And so when I guide students, I tell them, don't try and make something out of nothing, make something out of something. And what that means is look for a pain point that currently exists that does not have a solution. In today's world, you can now start a digital platform faster than we've ever been able to with the help of AI and tools and really everything that surrounds the young population these days. To develop a device is much harder. You're still prototyping, you're trying to create something, you're engineering something. Yeah. And so path of least resistance is going to be something in the digital space, and it's going to be filling a pain point for your local community, your region, and then hopefully reach out nationally.
Yeah, I really love that advice in this part that you talked about there, because when I remember when I was a senior in college, I wanted to make like a device type of thing. But knowing my skill set, looking back on it, it's like I'm a senior in college, like developing like a prototype, but a whole device and actually selling it is a whole different ballgame than actually just doing something digitally that you can work anywhere, and it's software. It's a much easier thing to actually launch, and you should. For me, like looking back on it, like there's no way I'm going to do that as a senior in college. I'm sure there's a lot of seniors in college that could actually do that, but it's also like aligning, like knowing your skill set and like kind of bringing back your ambition. Be very ambitious, I think, but like kind of knowing like what can you actually launch while you're still a full-time student.
I 100% agree. And what I would also advise students or the younger demographic is don't always just think of the end goal. Many times I hear students say, I am going to start this company and I've already got my business cards and I've got my website, but they've done none of the infrastructure work. They haven't really done a business plan. And that's really what it boils down to. And what you really need to identify is, can it be a business? How many people does it solve a problem for? Is it 1 or is it 100? Is it only a problem that I have? And many times those immediate questions get overlooked. You almost want to poke holes in your idea to the point where you convince yourself not to do it. If after you've completely triaged your idea and you can't find any more reasons why not to do it, then you move forward. And you're much more equipped and better prepared to talk to an investor at that point, or simply put, your customers, who are the most important. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like a lot of times, just speaking straight from experience, is just like, you can have all like the ideas in the world, but it's actually getting someone that it's going to pay for the actual product itself. And a question came to mind when you're talking about that is like, what is a common like pitfall that you see with college graduates or college students when they're like, I want to start a business, but what do they typically not actually think about when they're doing that?
The number one thing I see them missing is the insurance and liability issue of any business. And if you talk to any business owner, you are constantly making sure that you are protected, that your customers are protected, and that you have the right infrastructure in place. I constantly say the word infrastructure. Whether you're in real estate, you're selling a widget, or doing anything in between, insurance is incredibly important. And in some industries, I'd venture to even say most industries, insurance becomes one of your top expenses. If you just completely forget about that and not worry about being, number one, incorporated correctly, or insured correctly, or set up your legal entity correctly, you're setting yourself up for some serious issues in the future. You really want to insulate you as a person by setting up a company so that if something does go sideways, it's the company that's dealing with it and not you personally.
Yeah, I think that is very sound advice. I feel like a lot of times like people are just going to like jump into it and like get started, but like they're not legally protected in case something goes wrong. And it's not to say that something always goes wrong. I mean, something always goes wrong in a business and you have to fix it. But like legal wise, you know what I'm trying to say here. I want to talk to speak specifically to the AI portion, because I think you're in a very unique position to talk about like the opportunities in AI when it comes to entrepreneurship. So what are you seeing in the AI industry when it comes to entrepreneurship that you would also advise people?
This is actually the exact topic that my course is currently focused on. And there's two things that a young entrepreneur focusing in artificial intelligence needs to understand. Number one is, are you building an AI model or are you building a business that's using AI to support it? They're two very different things. And number one is understanding what is AI at its most basic form. Many times the answers I get, the overwhelming answers I get, are just simply incorrect. What people usually feed back to me are tools. They'll say ChatGPT is AI. And my answer back is that is a form of AI. It's a tool that delivers artificial intelligence, but that is not all-encompassing AI. And so I first like to set the groundwork to say, what is it that you want to accomplish? Now, once you get over that hurdle and you understand what the business is you're trying to build, now what's incredible in today, with what we're dealing with today, is that you have basically an assistant at your disposal immediately. And what I mean by that is what used to take weeks, building a business plan, for example, figuring out what your total addressable market is, what your serviceable addressable market is. That used to take weeks of research, interviews. Yeah. Now you can literally ask an AI tool, build me a business model, and it's done in seconds. Now, I always like to preface that with, you must have human interaction. You can't take it for what it is. We know that AI has hallucinations. Human interaction is still very important. But you're no longer starting with a blank slate. You're actually starting with a huge advantage that we just didn't have prior.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does like speed up the process of like building that business plan and like identifying opportunities in the market and like doing sound research as well. But also, I feel like a lot of companies are popping up here where you can just use like a ChatGPT plugin and like build a company on there. What are some pros and cons of using this ChatGPT plugin for like your first company or a company in general?
There are endless possibilities and positives that I can think of. Like I said, it's not, for example, like writing a paper where you're going to say, write me this paper and then move on to the next task. What you're really using these tools for, ChatGPT, Bing, Bard, Gemini, there's a multitude of them out there. Yeah. What you're really using it for is to help you, just like the cell phone helped us to advance as a society. What I see now is, my belief is that we are in an industrial revolution. We are seeing what our future is going to look like. We're getting a taste of it. And so these tools are truly a support function. Many of these tools, you should start interacting with them by using the word help. Help me to do X rather than do this. And so I see students not understanding how to prompt the system well. And that's actually my course focuses on how to tell the tool what you want from it and how to get the information out of it and how to converse with it, because that's really what it is. The tool wants to help you. All of this is to say that no AI tools yet have context. They're not humans. Yeah. And so contextually, you still need that human interaction. But to do all the legwork, I would 100% say you should be relying on a AI tool.
I absolutely love that. I want to talk about that like prompt engineering piece as well. How can you like effectively use ChatGPT in the prompts to like get the answer that you want? What's the best usage case or best usage cases here?
Sure. There's something that I have been teaching now for quite a while, and it's a very simple prompt. Act as, do this in this way. If you have those three things mastered, you can pretty much get the tool to give you the information you need for any industry. And so when I say act as, if you are looking at buying a house, tell the tool to act as a realtor. What it does is it starts putting it in its frame of mind, in the right world, so that it's answering the question, not just in a general sense, but it's doing it in a very particular way. And so if you say act as, in this example, a realtor, find me a house in Charleston, South Carolina, and do it in a way that's most efficient, you now just took the world and put it in the palm of your hand. And so if you use that very simple prompt to start your process, you'll go a long way.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like honestly, I could be using ChatGPT much better. I feel like I'm sure there's thousands of courses right now on like prompt engineering as well, but it's actually like using it effectively, because like you can use it to its degree, but like being able to actually use this prompt engineering can take it to a whole new level.
I would agree. And a good way to think about it in parallel to things everyone's using today that everyone's comfortable with, just think about the browsers you use. There's people out there that like Chrome, some like Safari, some like Edge, and everything in between. And if you use one every day and you jump over to the other one, it's almost like you're in a foreign landscape. because you're just not used to where the buttons are, how extensions work. And so find where you do the best. So there's, like I said before, there's ChatGPT, there's Bing, there's endless number of AI tools. Find the one you're most comfortable with, find the one that you speak to the best, and kind of carry on with it. And you'll see yourself just exponentially getting better with it day by day.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about like getting exponentially better day in, day out. What are some things, like what do you think skills someone should develop what are the skills you think someone young in their career should develop to like become an entrepreneur, or like kind of like start developing that entrepreneurial mindset?
The triage portion. And I mentioned that earlier. For some reason, even grown adults who have built businesses or great careers themselves miss this piece. Just because you can build it does not mean that it is going to be a successful product or service. What you need to understand is that many of the greatest ideas die on the vine. There's something called the Valley of Death in the tech transfer world, which is the world that ZI operates in. And I see daily some of the greatest ideas ever just die in the middle of their development process because they either didn't have enough funding, they weren't thought through enough, they weren't triaged fully. And when I say triage, what I mean is what I had mentioned earlier. Can it be built? How are people going to get it? How are you going to distribute it? Is it going to sell differently in the Northeast than it would in the Southwest? And so really building your business plan and doing it in a detailed fashion is probably the most important thing you should have really wrapped up tight before you even start to talk about running the business.
I like that. So no matter the business, you're telling someone like develop that business plan that is thought out through and through.
100%. And I would support that with, I see every day how technologies are licensed or sold or co-developed. And the first question that any type of venture capitalist, investor, or co-developer asks are those questions. They want to know that if they're giving you money, they're not just going to do it because you think it's a good idea. They want to make sure that their investment is going to show a return. They want to know when that return is going to happen, where they sit at the cap table, and is this product really worth it? So not only for your own benefit, but for future stakeholders in the business.
Interesting. A question that comes to mind here is like, we're talking, primarily this has been like a conversation, just from a general sense, like AI, software, all that good stuff. But there is a lot to be said about like family run businesses that you could start in college that could cash flow like pretty fast. I mean, a service business could cash flow in about a month if you do it correctly. Do you ever advise people for their first companies to start like a service business, especially in college?
I absolutely would. And that's really where my origin story is. It's in family businesses. So family businesses are a great place to grow. You generally, in a family business, have had it around. As a kid, my family was in apartments. I was cleaning apartments since I could remember. I was understanding what a leasing process looked like. And just by osmosis, kind of, I was learning what the industry was about. And so if you're looking for your least path of resistance, you usually have all the resources around you when you grew up in a family-owned business. Now, that comes as a double-edged sword because there's also things that come with that. There are emotional ties, there's political ties, there's money, and everything in between. So I would definitely say a service-based family business is a great way to understand what business really is, but also take it with a grain of salt, knowing that you're going to have to navigate some areas that you normally wouldn't if you went off and did it on your own.
Absolutely. Two questions here. Service-based businesses. Can you give us a few examples just for the listeners of like family-run service-based businesses, just for examples for the listeners?
Sure. And I can tie that back to my experience. In my experience, we had the service of leasing apartments. We owned apartment buildings and we would lease the space. There was commercial real estate that we also leased. Now, very particular to service was the maintenance piece. If you own property, anybody who knows that world understands that maintenance is a key component of your daily life. And what we had realized is that you could spin out a maintenance company on its own and then help others that are looking for maintenance. And so service-based means that you're providing pretty simply a service to someone who needs it. Service-based businesses are some of the most thankless and hard jobs to perform. Mm-hmm. You are generally only approached when something is wrong. And when everything is right, you're very rarely applauded for it. So you have to learn and know that that's happening. And as a business owner, make sure you're supporting your staff accordingly because they usually aren't getting the accolades that they deserve.
Yeah. I feel like with service-based businesses, that's one example, but there are thousands. Like you could do window washing, you could do painting, you could do from an agency model, you could do lead gen for a company. I feel like young in your career, these are great like training wheels because the upfront capital that you actually need to get started with these are very little, especially from an agency service perspective. All you need is like yourself essentially to get started. But yeah, there's more that comes in. I feel like that's a really good opportunity for students in college to actually get started with their first company instead of building some crazy app that you don't know will really work. A service-based company is a tried and true process to actually get going.
You make a great point. I would also say that sales in general can pretty much teach you everything you need to know about business. If you've ever sold anything or had to sell anything or wanted to, you've learned how to approach a customer, dissect a customer, understand personality types. And you usually have to touch distribution, production. Sales is a really great place to know what you're made of. And if all else fails in life, you can always go sell something. That's something I tell my students constantly.
I love that. I'm very thankful that I got my career started in sales because like it has taught me so much for like my own business. I feel like that's a great way. If you want to start a company even later in your career, you want to, getting started with sales right after school is a great way to get started with that because you're really owning your own path and you're learning a whole lot about business being so customer facing.
Yeah, I started my career in sales and actually thought I was going to be a lifetime salesperson. And then I realized I could help others be very successful in their sales careers. My wife did the same thing. My father was in sales. It is in your blood. It's not easy, but the upside is huge. The downside is also huge. So you just got to learn to deal with it.
Joe, I bet you were a killer salesman. I bet you were insane at it, but
I loved it.
Yeah. I want to hit back to that, like the family home service-based businesses. So like, how would you advise someone to like navigate that journey of like first job after school, even working in school of the home service family-based businesses?
Uniquely, I would suggest not jumping into your family business right away. It happened to me, and I was able to go and set roots on my own. I went and set my career path. I did my own thing. I stayed away from the family businesses for a while and then came back to it. And what it allowed me to do is allowed me to be humble because when you walk into a family business, sometimes, and this isn't always, but you're sometimes given titles or positions or authority that maybe you're not ready for. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're learning on the fly, but there is something to be said about going out, understanding a sales model, for example, learning things that the current family business maybe isn't doing, and bringing those skills and attributes back to the family business to make it stronger.
I love that.
Secondarily, and maybe just as important, is setting expectations up front. Family businesses are dynamic. As I mentioned before, they have emotions, money, and you know how to push each other's buttons differently than anyone else would. And so setting expectations up front to know when we're at work, we are coworkers, and when we are at home, we are family members. And here is what our 1, 3, and 5 year plan looks like. I think it's very important because when you start to intertwine those worlds, it can be emotionally and physically draining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like for the emotional standpoint, like you said, like I'm just thinking about if I worked with my own family, like you just know what buttons to push. They know what buttons to push for you. And that can be a very charged situation that you get in. But setting those upfront expectations is a great way to like lay that boundary early on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's been some traumatic experiences for me personally, and I've consulted for businesses that have done the same or experienced the same. Many times family businesses are their worst own enemy because it's very difficult for them to understand that it's time to hire someone to take over some of the responsibilities that you did for 20, 30 years. And until you're able to allow someone else to help you, kind of the help me help you scenario, you're really halting yourself. You're never going to grow out of that small mom and pop mindset. And sometimes that's okay. If that's what your goal is, that's fine. But if you're looking to scale and get bigger, you have to be willing to trust others, listen to others, and really grow.
Absolutely. And a question that came to mind earlier, how did you know it was time to go to your family business? It sounds like you had a career a little bit, but yeah, how did you decide to go back into the family business?
I truly thought it was my passion, and everything just kept leading me back. Yeah. I was having an extraordinarily successful career, and it was actually based in sales. It was in an industry that was tied to what my family did. And I just felt like it was time. It was more of a feeling more than anything. I tried probably pushing it too quickly. and did not set expectations correctly for the future. Now, I'll give myself some credit. I was probably too young and naive to even know that setting the expectations should have been done.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot from it, ended up separating from the family business, and went off, and now here I am. But it was more of a feeling more than anything. But I would highly suggest for anyone thinking of continuing to run with a family business, go out there and get your feet wet just a little. The family business, if it was there for 20 years, it'll be there for another 3.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, different set of issues. But it's never a bad idea to just go see what else is out there at first.
Yeah. Would you try to align like the industry that you get? If you know, like family business is what you want to do when you're 27, 28, would you recommend those first few years aligning with that same industry to like learn the ins and outs from like another business perspective then?
I think that's obvious. That's probably a good path, but I would also say and suggest not going into something exact. You kind of want to look at maybe a pivot or an offshoot of the industry that you're related to. I mentioned earlier real estate. The pivot for me was maintenance and homeowners association management. So while they were still in the same universe, they were not in the same exact industry. And what it allowed me to do was become more diverse, more empathetic, and I was able to understand the business on a much deeper level.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think looking back at my career, like, because I did like the corporate thing for about 2 years, and like I started my company when I was like 24, like old 23, young 24. So it's like I got my 2 years of corporate experience, but I think there's something absolutely to be said about getting that 4 to 5 years and like really soaking it in and then starting. From my perspective, like you do make a ton of mistakes, but you have to be able to learn from that. And that's a whole nother skill set of an entrepreneur, is to be able to learn and actually correct those mistakes as well.
Yeah. And you make a good point about mistakes. If you jump into a family business and you start making mistakes, that's an emotional toll. You're making mistakes not only for your business, but for your family.
Oh man.
And if you're going to go make mistakes, you might as well go make mistakes somewhere else and come back with the education that you now have.
Yeah, that's great advice. We are kind of winding down on time here, but I want to just hit on a point you said earlier. So you have sold 5 separate companies, like exited 5 separate companies. I'm curious, like, what's a common denominator between those 5 different companies, just for people to start thinking about, priming their minds about, like, if I want to sell a company, I need to be thinking about this. What was a common denominator for you?
A lot of it happened organically and naturally. I never pressed for it. And so one thing kept leading to another. And I'll give you an example. There was commercial space that we owned and managed, and one of the spaces had a laundromat in it. The laundromat decided they no longer wanted to be in business and were going to leave. And in order to rehab a laundromat is very expensive to get a new tenant in. Yeah. And so I got the bright idea of saying, hey, maybe I could run a laundromat. And I did. So that natural door opened. And what I would say is, somebody once told me, luck is where hard work meets opportunity. There's really no such thing as luck. And if you don't put in the hard work when the opportunity presents itself, you're going to miss it if you didn't put in the hard work. So in that example, I had put in the hard work to understand how to run a business. I understood some of the maintenance and ideas around how to run really any business. So when that laundromat opportunity came along, I was somewhat ready. It was an opportunity that I took. If I wasn't ready mentally or financially or anything in between, that opportunity would have just gone right by me and I never would have capitalized on it.
Absolutely. You definitely have to know when the opportunity is there. But Joe, last question for you. If someone's like, oh my gosh, this Joe's guy is amazing, I want to learn more about him and connect with him, where can they do so? Where can they find you at?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm also very easily found on the usual suspects. So pretty much any social media platform. You can also find me by searching for me on the web, and you'll find me through the Zucker Institute or College of Charleston. But I'd say primarily LinkedIn would be the best place to go.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much for your time today. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you also.